Hey guys as well, and today I want to have a little discussion with you guys because the Greninja Suspect testing is still going on, obviously, and there's a lot of, debate flowing back and forth, and I mean, the same few points keep getting covered when I see any sort of debate about Greninja, so I don't want to talk about not like heavily talk about those main points of discussion. I want to look at it in a different way than everyone else that is just looking at Greninja as a Pokemon itself, because the main thing I see from the Suspect test isn't that Greninja itself is like too good. I mean, Greninja's a great Pokemon, don't get me wrong, but the main way I'm looking at this Suspect test and how everyone should be looking at it, I feel like, is what we're doing to the metagame if we ban it. Now, people are just, like I said, people are looking at it like Greninja itself, trying to be like, oh, Greninja is too frail, 4-move pool syndrome, won't do well in Ubers, and like, all sorts of stuff that's basically just saying it's, for some reason, not good enough in the tier it's in, and, whatever, but the thing is that no one can deny the fact that it is the #1 most used Pokemon in OU. We literally have the stats that say that, and it is a pretty overwhelming amount that Greninja puts in for that usage. Like, it's very much higher than anything else. Like, the only thing that can combat it as far as usage goes is Landorus, but half of that usage is because of Greninja being around, because Landorus is one of the few things that checks Greninja and also deals with half the other meta that you need to deal with, which is why Landorus is so high in usage, like the Scarf Landorus and such. But the thing that I want to look at is the healthiness of the metagame without Greninja, the over-centralization factor, and basically how, the way I look at it, removing Greninja from the meta is actually going to make it a lot more diverse, and it's going to be overall healthier, which a lot of people just aren't talking about. They're just talking about Greninja itself and how it's so easy to deal with, or blah 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 blah. But like I said, the way I look at it is Greninja getting banned is going to be the most healthy thing we can do for the metagame. Why? As I just stated, the fact that it is the most used Pokemon in OU, it's one of the most needed Pokemon that you need to actually build your team around so that you have some way to deal with it, because otherwise it's going to run train through you, and to deny that is silly, because the thing is with Greninja, it's a Pokemon that can still net at least 1 or 2 kills before you have a way to deal with it. And if you have to lose a Pokemon to be able to kill a Pokemon and not just be able to straight up fucking kill that Pokemon, I mean, that's not so great, because half the time you're going to be losing a Pokemon just for a revenge kill. The fact that you have to lose a Pokemon for a revenge kill when it could still be a perfectly good Pokemon to have around for the rest of the game, it's huge, and you can't exactly prepare for that well, especially with a varied Pokemon like Greninja. And then there's the fact that it gets thrown on any team. The fact that you literally have 5 Pokemon and you're like, well, I have nothing better I want to use, so let's just use a Greninja. It limits team variety because it's such a good Pokemon that you almost can't stand to not run it, because it deals with the meta so well. And it's over-centralizing it, because either you gotta be too prepared for it or you have to run it yourself in excessive amounts. Like, I was looking at a ton of RMTs and like trying to even team build without Greninja, and with Greninja present in the metagame, it's impossible to really not think about it. Like, there are sometimes some Pokemon that are even top tier that you just don't even need to pay mind to, because generally your team can deal with it. And I get the fact that you can't have a team that is built around beating every single Pokemon, but you should be able to have a healthy way of dealing with it without having to waste so many resources to do it. And that's the problem that Greninja presents. There's no healthy way to kill it or deal with it. It's just very, I don't know the exact word I'm looking for, but it's just not a good thing to have. And the thing is, like I said before, the over-centralization factor, it makes it so we're so centered around Greninja. There are a ton of things that could be being used right now, but we can't because Greninja exists. Like, I get, you can use whatever you want. I will never discourage it, as long as you're doing it well. That's the only thing I ever think of, is like, people always think, when it comes to OU, only use the top threats. No, use whatever works for the meta that is best for you. Now, at this current state in time, it's hard to do, but as we have seen from past trends, there have actually been plenty of metagames where you could take something lower tier and actually use it effectively in OU. We've seen it multiple times. Like, towards the end of 4th gen, towards the end of 5th gen, once they got the bans for, the obviously broken Pokemon out of the way, we saw a lot of diversity in those metagames. Like, people always say the top Pokemon get the most used, but once we get a lot of those, once we get the metagame more stable, we get a lot of the necessity for the top Pokemon out of the way. That's where you truly see the creativity shine. Like, even though in, let's say, Black and White era, we were centralized around weather teams, but you could easily make a creative weather team, a creator weatherless team. There was tons of ways to be creative in 5th gen. Like I said, once we got rid of that, a lot of the top smoking players, they used the threats that weren't exactly expected or were overlooked. These top players that everyone thinks, oh, they only use the top Pokemon, they use a lot of the lower tier Pokemon, and they do it well. And it's just silly to think you can't use lower tier stuff, but the thing is, in an unhealthy metagame, there is no way to effectively use it. So, really, what I think the Suspect test about is making this metagame healthier so we have more diversity, we have more options to use more things effectively, so that we're not restricted to this smaller pool of Pokemon, because right now, it's, like I said, it's hard to use other Pokemon, but the moment we keep stabilizing the meta, there are a ton more Pokemon that can be used, and you have more variety, which, that's been all the rage, I feel like, is that people always want more variety, but then when it comes to banning a Pokemon, they're like, no, we can't ban this Pokemon because banning a Pokemon is so wrong, even though you're going to get the diverse metagame that you wanted. You're going to be able to use your lower tier things to an effectiveness that you like, but you can't let go of a Pokemon that's obviously unhealthy for it and is restricting you from using that stuff. So, it's just, one of the things that perplexes me is the fact that people are willing to let an unhealthy metagame stay with a, because they don't want to ban a Pokemon, and they just don't want to actually have a fun and diverse metagame. And like I said, I get there's still standardization in any sort of metagame Smogon has ever had, but if you've taken a look at any of the old metagames, even X and Y had a good amount of diversity. You had a huge opportunity to use anything, and you could do it well, but right now, yeah, it's just going to be better off if we ban Greninja. Now, will we immediately see a new diversity? Not as much as I'm making it out to be. I'm basically just throwing the idea in your mind that we can have something better as a whole by getting rid of a couple of things here and there. And once we get to that point where really the really broken things are gone, we have a huge pool of things that can be used, because everyone thinks, oh, well, we're just going to keep taking every Pokemon out of OU till they're all banned. But the thing is, the OU tier is based all on usage. Once a Pokemon leaves, like I said, we can see a lot more Pokemon being used, which means a lot of things rise in usage and they become OU. The pool of Pokemon that are in the quote-unquote OU tiers all dependent on if it reaches that usage threshold. And a lot of them don't reach it because of the fact that, there are other huge oppressing threats. But once we get those out of the way, there's a lot more things that can be effectively used, and you'll see a lot more diversity. But like I said, it won't happen right away, but Greninja is a step in the right direction, And we're already seeing that on the Suspect ladder. There's a lot of things that are a lot more effective now. Sure, there are more things that are taking those spots as huge threats, but we're also breathing in new life to the tier, so it's not so much centralized over one Pokemon as it is a bunch of other Pokemon, but it's doing it in a more healthy way than Greninja was doing it. So, like I said, I don't want to make the argument for Greninja as far as like the Pokemon itself, but the state that it presents in the meta. And I'd like to get you guys to think about it the same way. I mean, I know a lot of you aren't going to be, you know, actually voting on the Pokemon yourself, but it's just a good thing to keep in mind going forward with any of the Suspect testing and just anything that's going to happen with the Smogon metagame, because of, you know, the fact that it's just the best way to look at it is, yeah, I mean, you get it by now, but, you know, those are my thoughts as far as, you know, the Greninja Suspect test and how, like I said, I think we should look at it going forward, and hopefully you guys agree with me. If you don't, you know, you can always leave a comment, and, you know, we can debate about it if you must, but, you know, at least if you're going to do it, I'd like to actually have a real logical argument, and actually, you know, not just, oh, we're going to compare different metagames like VGC to this, or, you know, something like that. You know, I want to actually discuss the OU or the Smogon tiers or whatever, you know, so like I said, I could be wrong, I could be right. It, you know, it's all a part of it, and yeah, so I'd like to hear what you guys have to say. Blah, 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 and, you know, personally, I hope Greninja goes, because like I said, the metagame would be a lot better off without it, and we're just going to have a nice freshness to it that I think is going to be greatly appreciated. So, yeah, hope you guys enjoyed. Such a blah, recommend sub, and later, guys.